I think everybody here is well aware that the ACLU and the NAACP have invested some time to go to the courts to repeal the legislation. What has not really been reported publicly much is the fact that the Senate Democrats have begun a process of going to the court system. We did not align ourselves with the ACLU and the NAACP, not because we didn't agree, but because we had a different strategy. One, we wanted to allow them to not be viewed as a partisan. The second was we wanted to collect data. Their legal case will be based upon opinions and suggestions. We, over the since prior to April, have hired a legal team that had volunteers in the primary to go out and see how the process actually worked. They will be returning to the polls in the special election, which may occur, and the fall election to prove emphatically that this not only is a partisan, but has an impact upon one's franchise to vote. From the primary process, we are quite clear that there is evidence that the court will be presented that there have been people who have been denied the opportunity to vote, not because they are fraudulent in their activities, and in fact have historically voted. We found voters in the age of 85 years old who voted their entire time that they've been a part of this country, and now because they can no longer find a birth certificate because they're so old and came from a different country, they will forever be denied the opportunity to vote in Pennsylvania. That's not one person. There are multitudes of seniors who are in that category. Veterans, obviously young people, and certainly people of color also fall into that category. And so my responsibility over the last several months is to collect that data. That data probably will be prepared to be revealed at some point in time, and not too distant future, in the form of a court case where we're taking this on. And I want to be fair to all people and parties who are involved in this conversation or this debate. The polling numbers in Pennsylvania, and frankly in our districts, you know, when you talk to some Democrats in our district, prior to what Representative Terzai revealed, there were people who legitimately thought, who were Democrats, who legitimately thought, well, what's wrong with getting the ID? Now, when, of course, you explain to them the obstacles in terms of getting the identification, they too became converts. But in the meantime, the general public had an understanding that this was not necessarily a bad idea if we were keeping fraudulent people from voting. The execution of this is revealed in his comments, and more importantly, not just Representative Terzai's comment, but his spokesperson's comments. In other words, the spokesperson did not come back and say to you that those comments were intended to make sure that he was speaking to fairness. They revealed it was partisan. And understand something, yes, we're Democrats, but this conversation is about the larger context of what has always been a part of this country. The basic franchise is that if you're a democracy, you have the right to vote. And we encourage people the right to vote. And so understand this. For him to mimic those comments hails back to an era when it was okay to say women did not have the right to vote. And in fact, there was political advantage to use it, and people openly did it. It was okay to have African Americans not have the right to vote, and people openly did it. And by the way, they legislated it. That's what this conversation is about. It's not simply because the Democrats didn't and the Republicans do. It's not simply because they control all the branches of government. It's because to have partisan politics infect the democratic process upon which this country stands means you're tearing down the Constitution of which they hypocritically stand upon. There's nothing other than his comments, the retorts, and the facts to understand this is very dangerous territory in which we're participating. This hails back to the 20s, 30s, 40s, when categories of Americans were systematically denied the opportunity to express themselves in the basic franchise of who represents them. One man, one vote. That's what this is about. That's what his comments represent, and that's what his spokesperson's comments represent. That's why we're going to court. We're not going to court so that, one, Democrats can, in fact, win an election. We're going to court because some Republicans who don't and will not be able to get their voter ID because they live in a part of Pennsylvania and they're so old, they haven't been able to have a birth certificate since they've been here. So in fact, our participation is for all Pennsylvanians, not some segment of Pennsylvania. Thank you.